Hi, everybody.
Hello.
Uh, Hi, guys. Just thank you guys for sticking around. The ones of you still watching this, we are going to talk a little bit about the US market and what it takes to plan a tour, or if it's even possible right now. My name is Cecilia Nelson. I work with Independent Venue Week in the US, and I have since we started doing it since 2018. Uh, can we do a round of introductions? And can we start with Jackie, who I believe is muted?
Hi, Jackie Becker. Thanks for having me on. And I'm part of 11 Productions based in Kansas in the United States. And I independently book concerts around the Midwest.
And Serena?
Hi, I'm Serena from SAS Entertainment. Thanks again for having me on. For the past 8 years, I've been an artist manager, and in 2014, I set up SAS Entertainment with my business partner, Steve Hughes. We're predominantly an artist management and tour managing company, and over the past year, we've worked across multiple tours and festivals, including 4 major arena tours with Jason Derulo, Boyzone, Westlife, and Little Mix.
And Moose.
I'm Moose. I am the managing partner at Marauder and executive director at NIVA, National Independent Venue Association, and I work really closely with Cecilia on a daily basis.
Yeah, I just realized I forgot to say I work at Marauder. That's why I work with Independent Venue Week. But that seemed like the thing to lead with in this conversation, right? All right, you guys. I think before we sort of jump into talking about the current state of things, which is obviously interesting and unprecedented and chaotic to say the least, let's start maybe by talking a little bit about specifically independent venues and promoters and their role in international touring in the States. Jackie, I thought maybe we could start with you. Like, how do you see the role of independent venues and promoters specifically?
Oh, I mean, I think we, have a very important role, and I think not all of us want to be corporate people. And as an independent promoter, it gives me the freedom to work at any space, at any level, in any area. And I like that opportunity to be able to find new spaces, create new spaces, and the importance of an independent. There's a lot of artists that are also looking for that, coming from overseas, and knowing that you can, especially in the Midwest where I work out of, I can kind of connect the dots from major cities to get you from place to place.
Serena, is this something that you like? Is that something you recognize coming from the other side of the pond?
Absolutely. I mean, the US and the UK have always had a really special relationship, especially with live music. And I think since the Beatles, every UK artist has wanted to come over and crack America and tour coast to coast. I mean, the US is such a huge market for UK artists. In California alone, there's more live music venues than in the whole of the UK. So that just puts a little bit of perspective onto, how important the American market is. And independent venues play a massive role in that, from building an artist fan base to helping with sales, and also for them to get their touring stripes whilst doing so. So yeah, huge.
And Moose, you have a long history of working with artist development in the North American market, and I thought maybe you could also give your perspective on sort of what it means for international bands to be able to enter independent venues in the US.
Yeah, the US is all about entry points, right? And finding what that entry point might be and then being able to grow that into something else. And, the independent sector overall, not just with venues, but with record labels and publishers and booking agents, et cetera, the independent sector is going to be more likely to want to work with something because they just get it. And they're willing to take a risk, and it's more for, there are economics that are part of it, but it's very passion driven and exploratory. I think this is where trends start. This is where people get their first taste of something new. It could be a new genre. It could be a new artist. It could be a first tour. And also, the independent promoters and venues are more likely to go out of their way to book a tour around somebody's specific needs, as opposed to just taking a package and putting it into rooms and selling it nationwide as one simple package. And if you are at a certain level, that might be your only entry point, is to reach out to several dozen individual different promoters across the country, and then hope that they can put you on with somebody local, because that's ultimately the game when you're talking about developing artists.
All right. So I think, obviously, I like what you said about taking risks, because I think we all can agree that independent promoters and venues tend to be more likely to take risks, but there are certain kind of risks right now that a lot of them are not taking, and it's a health risk. So let's maybe parlay into that a little bit and start talking about the barriers that are right now. I mean, there's an obvious ones, like you're not really able to cross the border that easily, but the barriers that are for international artists to come to the US right now, and the barriers in like planning it. Oh, hi, Gomez.
Hi, everyone. Sorry.
No worries. Welcome.
Thank you.
Actually, I just posed a new question, but maybe you can give us a super quick introduction before we keep going.
Of myself?
Yes, please.
Gomez, I own 2 music clubs in Chicago, Subterranean and Beat Kitchen. Helped create Civil along with the owners of the Hideout and many others, Chicago Independent Venue League. And good enough, right?
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much. We're just about to start talking about the barriers to touring right now, and there are some obvious ones, but maybe Moose, you coming from NIVA and sort of having the overview and the lay of the land right now, what are the main barriers for international artists to be able to let it, like, one thing is touring, obviously a lot of stuff is getting canceled, but planning a tour right now, what is stopping?
Yeah, for international artists, it's always been difficult to be able to plan that first tour. And, the second and the third get a little bit easier because you have a foundation and you have some relationships. But I think that artists that are in the entry point phase are going to have the most difficult time being able to book anything right now, because it's not just a matter of forming relationships. It's a matter of taking up a potential spot that somebody who already has that relationship could sell out. And we're going to see this tier up as venues are able to reopen in the US, because those artists that would normally play, say, a 600 capacity room might choose to play a 300 capacity room and not take any chances. And of course, I'm talking about when we're able to hit 100% capacity. And right now, without being able to, with many venues not being able to open, but those that are playing at restricted capacities, it's the economics just aren't functional. And then you factor in all of the other unknowns that come with getting on a plane and everything else. I mean, I don't think that there's going to be an international tour for the next several months, certainly. For the rest of this year, very quite likely. And it might be well more than a year before there is the possibility to actively plan for it. Yeah. And then, of course, if you're already established and you have these relationships, you're going to be competing with people that are based locally. And the conversations we're having from NIVA on a national perspective are how impossible it is for the US to be able to reopen without the full country being reopened, because currently the shows that are being booked are even the ones that are holding dates are mostly holding dates around that artist's immediate region, right? We're not talking about really long, robust tours at this point.
Yeah, I feel like maybe you all have insight on this and what's going on right now, and if planning is even happening, especially for international tours. So maybe, Jackie, I can throw it back to you and kind of look at what you're planning for right now, if anything.
Well, at the moment, I mean, it's the big hustle of you got holds for something in, that was in April, that moved to October, that moved to next April. And now I'm even seeing everything is moving to the fall now in terms of venues at, I'd say 2,000 seats and under that I work out of. European and international touring, I have not heard a peep of anything. And again, that is the difficulty of how any artist can get across the country right now with states and in terms of who can be open, when you can be open. But for right now, everything is being pushed really far back and now looking into late of next year at this point.
You said late of next year?
At least the new holds I'm getting. So I have things probably in April, but for 2020, most of my national, international touring has kind of gone to the wayside and moved to 2021.
What are you seeing in Chicago, Gomez?
Oh, the same. You know, it was a month ago, 6 weeks ago, I'd say we were already confirming a lot of the spring, skipping fall. People are just, you know, it's such a challenge to route those tours that they don't want to waste the time doing it in a fall, only having to redo it again in the spring. And she's absolutely right. The bigger the artist, the more they're going to have to look into the fall, which is just, it's heartbreaking to have to admit that, but that's where we are.
Yeah. Serena, you're on the other side of that challenge. Are you planning for anything right now? And if so, how far?
Yeah. So our main issue in the UK is that currently we're banned from coming to the US. And that is the case with Ireland and also with the Schengen zones, which encompasses most of Europe, or 26 European countries. So even if you thought, oh, maybe I could get away with starting in the UK, going into Europe, and then going over from Europe into the US, it's still not possible. So first and foremost, I think we need to find out when the travel ban is going to be lifted. But as we're seeing with Europe, even if the travel ban gets lifted, there's no guarantee that it won't go back in place if we're having, more localized lockdowns. And I think a big challenge that we see in the UK that's happening in America is that not only is there an issue statewide, but that each individual state is kind of dealing with it a little bit different. So you might plan to come over and do a tour on the basis of what is currently the situation, but by the time that tour happens, it could be a whole different ball game. So we're in a bit of a holding pattern at the moment, just waiting to sort of find out. And we're not actually getting a lot of news from America. What I'm hearing from our American colleagues is that there's a lot of political stuff going on, and so until November, until the elections in November and things sort of calm down, that actually we might not be able to plan anything until early next year, which means that tours being, happening are going to be late next year at best, internationally, that is.
Yeah. So what would, and I think I'm going to post this to that's what's hard about doing these things in video, right? Is if you pose a question to the group, it's hard to see, but let's try and see how it goes, and and hopefully we won't all start talking at once. But I then wonder, and maybe there are people listening to this that are wondering too, knowing that you really don't know when you're going to be able to plan your next tour, if that's what you wanted to do and you thought that was the next step to sort of building your artist in the States. What does someone do to keep an artist relevant right now? Like to make sure that we're building towards, if we're able to tour next fall, we want to be ready for it. And we want to be able, we want to make sure that there's still an audience. What are some steps you can take?
Absolutely. I think any manager, and everyone's probably sick of hearing managers say this, but any manager would tell you that social media is such a hugely important platform for keeping artists connected to their fan base. So you can be so creative across social media. You can do listening parties, just as long as you keep the content really creative, really high, good quality content that fans are going to be engaged with. There's obviously loads of online gigs that people can do. Perhaps we're getting a little bit saturated with the online gigs, and maybe artists need to be a bit more choosy and pick strategically as to which ones they do, because there's only so many Ed Sheeran covers we can hear so many times, so many different ways. But that's really important, and maybe because releases are getting pushed back, maybe there's a song that isn't part of the release strategy that you actually really want to release, but maybe you can do that. And also collaborations are really important. If the UK artist can collaborate with a US artist and keep, or anywhere else globally, and keep that going, keep the fans engaged, keep them fed with good quality content, I think is really, really key right now.
I'd go a little bit deeper and say that I think that the British artists and managers and record labels are probably better prepared than Americans are as far as being able to build up an audience in the US at this moment. And part of that reason is because from a developmental perspective, it's already had to be worked of how are we going to reach Americans and how are we going to keep that that conversation going across multiple singles being rolled out without being able to tour. And most artists aren't necessarily touring the US for the first several years of being active. And the great thing about right now from a promotional perspective is that everybody has the same tools, and everybody is stuck at home, at least in the US side of things, and it's likely going to be that way for the foreseeable future. So because you're talking about export, and you have to put thought into it, and it's not just a matter of gassing the van and going to a couple gigs on the weekend between your day job, you have to think further ahead anyway. So in line with what Jackie and what Gomez are saying, I would think that plan the next tour for late 2021 or early 2022, and then just kind of put everything in place that fills those gaps between now and then, in the same way you would if there weren't a pandemic and you were thinking to yourself, hey, this is our first release, we're going to tour across the UK and Europe, and maybe we'll hit the US the next time. Well, now it's more important that the US is looked at as the next time for all the reasons that Serena just said. And certainly with Brexit, taking shape, and the US having the issues that the US currently has, anything that Brits are doing that are off the island are going to have to take a lot more thought right now.
Yeah. So now we're talking about planning for future, but we're also, I think, all uncertain of what the landscape is going to look like if we can't plan anything until 2022. So I thought, let's maybe talk about what's being done right now to make sure that there are rooms to return to. And I thought, Gomez, since you were sort of involved in getting Sybil off the ground, and can you maybe talk about what it takes to, what you guys are doing right now to try to just make sure it can reopen?
I think it's what we're all doing, even within NIVA. It really has to be at a national level. This is a national issue, and it's only the federal government that has money. City of Chicago's been broke for decades. State of Illinois too. So we are looking to push the Restart Act, and now even a better program, a better bill or act would be the SOS Act and Save Our Stages Act. And all our effort is in that right now. That's what we have to focus on. That's what we have to push for and hope for some relief. We are now talking about being shuttered possibly through the fall of next year. And there are some serious carrying costs in that. And like we've been telling the world, it's like we don't want a handout. We're not looking to keep our profits that we had before, just help in keeping our overhead paid for so that we can sustain this, everybody together, right? It's the quote, this like, hey, we're all in this together. Yeah. Some of us are in this a little differently than others, and artists too, right? I mean, I get it. It's all of us in this industry. It's not just the venues, but that naturally, that's my primary focus, is keeping the venues afloat until we can open.
Yeah. Jackie, I think you might be coming. You move from venue to venue. You might be coming from this from a bit of a different perspective. Can you weigh in too?
Oh, I mean, I care about every single venue that I work out of, and it's just heartbreaking every day to realize the over 100 venues that I can go into and put a concert in just aren't able to open and may not be for a really long time. And so, yeah, all of us are doing the best we can through the help of NEVA and trying to push the SOS Act and the Restart Act. And, you know, we saw a really great surge by, you know, citizens of our country to push and let our legislators know. But it's currently really in the hands of our legislators because that's where the money's with the federal government right now. And they need to hear us and see us and know that what our industry is, which, you know, we're as venues and as promoters, we're feeders to everything else in our community. You know, you go to a concert, so then you also buy a coffee, you shop, you know, you wander to the record store down the street, or you go eat at a restaurant or stay at a hotel or an Airbnb. And we're such an important part of really each scene and each city and where the money is spent. And if we're not open and we're not doing events, it negatively affects everything in the community. So it's important to notice us. And to, at this point, for the first time ever, for most of us who are promoters and venues, we're asking for some assistance, and we never have before.
Yeah, Moose, maybe you can help us backtrack a little bit, because now we're talking about acts that we hope are going to get passed in the US, but we have obviously a lot of British people tuning into this. So maybe talk a little bit about the difference between operating a creative business of any kind in Europe versus the US.
Yeah, you know, all the stereotypes are true, right? Like, you know, the US is very much a capitalistic society. We are generally out for our own. We don't have government support, at least not on the developmental level. And, you know, everything you see on the news is probably not that exaggerated to what we're actually dealing with as far as the haves and the have-nots. And, you know, when you're talking about, I'll talk about live music in particular, you know, NEVA didn't exist prior to the pandemic hitting. And there had been discussions as far as organizing. And I did a panel with Gomez about a year ago. And I remember Gomez saying quite clearly, don't wait for there to be a time of need before you're working with your neighbors. And because, you know, Gomez and his peers in Chicago had dealt with some issues locally, and they had to rally together and they had to form civil to be able to make that fight. And those words ring true, right? You know, so the pandemic basically forced on a national level that community that had existed on a peer level. But for us and the independent promoters and the independent venues, even people locally might be friendly or neighborly, but they're still competitors. And so there's, I wouldn't necessarily say there's resistance, but there's hesitance to want to join in such a vulnerable manner with people that have or could take shows from you for one reason or another. And right now the playing field is level, right? So that necessity is there and everybody has to do it. But what didn't exist and what doesn't exist and what the Save Our Stages Act and what Restart is trying to address and what we as a country are trying to address is we don't have that infrastructure from a governmental level that will help allocate funds to certain industries or sectors that would need it. So when we find ourselves in this position, the independent venues are starting from scratch to be able to tell the government this is why it's important. Whereas essentially every other country in the world or every other established country in the world has some type of mechanization for funding or cultural programs or you know, something in the system that is going to be relegated of, I fit in this category, this is my government office that I reach out to. And, you know, for us, everything is so politicized that looking at this as an arts investment is, you know, negates half of the politicians that would potentially help. And looking at it as an economic investment is going to have a split as to why should money be given or to whom. And so we didn't have any of those systems in place.
And I think maybe, now we talked earlier about how important these independent rooms and promoters are, especially to developing artists, because that seems like that's really the layer that's going to be potentially suffering from this big time. So I think maybe let's start looking towards the future a little bit, regardless of whether we're going to get past COVID-19 in 2021 or 2022 or when it's going to happen, and talk a little bit about how this is going to change touring in the US in the future. I'm throwing it to the room again. So
I think from a UK point of view, I think a lot of the big named or more established artists in the short term are going to be the ones that are going to be able to take the risk to come over to the States as and when things start opening up and we get some sort of normality. The government here have just trialled social distancing gigs. They did one at the London Palladium last week or the week before. It was at a third the capacity. All the audience were wearing face masks. They saw that it was possible to have a socially distanced gig, but the artists couldn't really tell what the audience were feeling because they were in seats with their face masks, and it was, they filmed it and they showed it on telly, and it was all a bit dry. So I think when things start opening up again, if we're going to have, if we're not going to be at full capacity, the bigger artists are going to probably be able to offset that with higher ticket costs. The smaller artists, the emerging artists, the independent venues, I think they're going to really struggle. But what I do hope long term is that there is a renewed love and respect and passion for live music, because we've all been a bit guilty. We would like to go to a gig, but actually, we've got YouTube and we've got something on Netflix or whatever, and actually I think that we're now going to crave live music, and so I really do hope that in the long term we're going to see a benefit from sort of being cut off from live music at the moment.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the issue at hand is getting to the other side, because once everybody's on the other side, everyone who's sitting around right now just stressed and not figuring out how to make bills and what dates you can book and what dates you can't book, that world's going to be just in the past and quickly. So as people are able to book shows, it'll be a welcome environment for everybody. I mean, I can't speak on behalf of Jackie and Gomez, but I know they would much rather be doing anything rather than political activism, and that's what every single venue and promoter and staff member and fan and artist has been doing for the last few months in the US, right? Like, we've been trying to tell everybody, like look at us, you live for us, help us.
I've always said that there's really nothing that compares to the relationship between an artist on that stage and their fans. And it's what drives me every day in my career and why I love what I do so much, because it cannot be replaced. Even if you want to try to open a venue at 25% and sit in a seat and wear a mask, there is nothing with having this row of fans right in front of your face, and you can touch and see them and feel them and hear them and sing along, and you fall in love at a concert. You may go with your best friends. There's so many things that happen at a concert that cannot be replaced. So yes, we're all waiting eagerly for that opportunity. But, again, in the United States, it's not safe right now, and you can't really be open at 25%. It's not a good experience for an artist. Venues can't there's no money to go around at 25%, and that feeling isn't there. So I think we're all waiting eagerly to hope everyone wears their masks in our country and we can try to get to a place of new normal. There won't be an old normal, but there has to be a new normal. And, if I'm going to say it, I think the independent promoters, independent venues are some of the hardest working, craziest people out there. And we're going to push as hard as we can to find new ways and find new rhythms to get us there.
Yeah, I'm just gonna let that just sit for a little bit before before jumping into anything else, because I think there is also the argument that there's so many new ways we're seeing people set up shows. Kind of to Serena's point earlier, it's like you see all these live streams, and it also feels like there might be a fatigue around it. And I think coming from a buyer perspective in the US, Jackie, is there anything that you're seeing work right now? Like we just talked about the limited capacity, that doesn't work. But are there any other models that you think make sense right now?
I mean, I can tell you what I'm seeing. I think, there have been definitely a lot of the streaming things that have been happening, but I think there is fatigue in that. But there have been some success with different artists. And so, we've been doing that and pushing that through some of our venues that have the strongest social media presence, so we can help those artists and keep them relevant, because we do have to support the musicians too. That's, I think, the biggest piece in all of this is the creators of this, and we have careers because of these creative people. So we want to try to help and do the streams when we can. And if we sell a couple tickets, great, to help keep these artists that we love and care for, that have been a piece of our venues for so many years, still hopefully finding a way to share their music. We've seen some success, I think, across the country with some of these drive-in concerts. But again, there's difficulty with that and keeping people in their spaces and whatnot. But I think those are the things I see right now would be the streaming and then the drive-in concerts. Beyond that, I personally, I think that's the big thing too. You're seeing, like, do you open a little bit, or are you part of the problem then? And I want to be part of the solution. So most of our venues are closed right now because we want to be part of the solution so we can open sooner.
Yeah, Moose, what are you seeing with the NIVA membership? Are the same two things, live streaming and drive-in, or otherwise nothing?
Yeah, I mean, again, everybody's in the same situation, right? The entire country's in the same situation. So even though there's mandates being made from a city or a state level, and different states are opening to different degrees, for the most part, you leave your home, you risk getting sick, right? That's kind of how that's exactly how it's working. It's something the rest of the world has figured out. And so when you have an organization that has well over 2,000 members that are each able to make their own business decisions, you're going to have some people that are making decisions that serve their needs, and you're going to have others that are making decisions that might be more community minded, and that's just the nature of being independent. But I think overall, what we've experienced and what we've had discussions with is very much in line with Jackie's line of thinking. And though how Jackie said it is very much what I agree with, which is you want to be part of the solution, not the problem. There's other reasons to want to wait until it actually makes practical sense to fully reopen as well. And it's also more respectful to your staff. And there's a lot of questions as far as these government programs and unemployment and what happens if you reopen and you hire back your staff and then you have to close again in 3 weeks or 3 months. And, where are you going to get this staff from? I mean, I'm speaking a little bit anecdotally here, but most of the people that I know that were of a certain age that lived in a major city have, if their lease terminated, they're back home, right? So you're having a lot of exodus of workers as well, and people that are moving back in with family or somewhere cheaper than what they otherwise did. I mean, if you're no longer able to walk down the street for a show, is it worth paying 3 times the rent than what your friends are for living an hour outside of the city center? And all these things are coming into play. So being able to reopen at full capacity is really the only solution here. And it's why all of these dates, when we're talking about how to plan another tour and when the next thing is going to happen, I think if you're coming from overseas and you're planning on being in the US market, it's why it makes more sense to make a real plan for further down the road. And let's not even get into whatever's happening with the government transition or lack of a transition and visas and everything else that will likely fall into place. But just as far as reading the room a little bit, you have to realize that there's so much uncertainty here, and we as a country are not doing anything that would make it seem like this is going to end anytime soon. So, you know, you have to just kind of be mindful of that when you're making your own plans.
Yeah, I think it circles back to what we talked about in the beginning, right? Are you able to plan anything right now? And if you are, what are those things? And I think you said, you know, visas, let's not even get into it. And we probably shouldn't, because none of us are lawyers. But I guess there's a point there as well to be made, that it's not just what's happening right now. It's not just immediate changes because of the virus. There are some like other things going on with visas in the US right now, especially work visas, which it hasn't really affected the O visa yet, which is generally what artists would enter on. But I think, I mean, at least as an O visa holder myself, I'm holding my breath for the day that there's an executive order signed that O visas can't cross the border again, you know?
Yeah, but let's also put that in perspective, you know, and say it for what it is, which is, you know, these visa restrictions are not being put into place to stop what the current government would consider British citizens from coming over to the U.S., right?
Yeah.
And you know, so all the restrictions that have been put in place over the last 4 years have not been to stop Brits or Canadians or, you know, French people from coming over. That's not the motivation. I think everybody sees that. So you know, the next 5-6 months of this current administration, and should it continue or should it not continue, there's still going to be a lot of governmental issues that need to be resolved. So the process of applying for a visa, with or without this current administration, is not going to get any easier in the short term. And people need to allow a significant amount of time to navigate that process, whether it's new restrictive regulations or new less restrictive regulations. It's still going to be an adaptation process to be able to make that work.
Of course.
Yeah.
I think just reminding you guys that if you do have questions, you can put them in comments. I believe this is streaming on both Facebook and YouTube. And then I think, you know, let's talk a little bit about, one thing is being able to tour, and obviously we're a group of people here who are just yearning for that to restart. But maybe let's talk a little bit about the artist. Is it any kind of artist that is going to want to tour again, or can you imagine that some people just might find other ways of building their careers and building their audiences? I think, you know, it speaks back to what does the future look like, and is everyone actually going to want to get back into it? Because I think we all do, but is there a scenario where some artists wouldn't want to?
I think personally, most artists need to be in front of an audience, face to face, as Jackie mentioned. And I think as soon as we can physically start touring safely, I think artists will start flocking to getting those tours booked in. Not just financially, although they do obviously earn a considerable amount of income from live tickets and from merchandise sales, which happens on tour as well. But I just think as an artist, 99.9% of the artists that I know will they're just itching already to get out and start touring. There's always been other income streams, and there always will be, like publishing, sync deals, of course, record sales, brand sponsorships and things like that. So I think that will still continue. But, you know, for it pumps in artist veins, you know, the getting out, performing in front of a crowd, doing a great job, feeling the love, you know, it's what they were born to do.
I think, well, I think that's true. I think it's become very clear from this conversation that even though people are trying to find new ways to approach this and new ways to keep people engaged, it really isn't a substitute for getting out there and actually meeting people face to face. So I think if that's what we're preparing for, maybe let's talk a little bit about now the venues in the US are actually sort of organizing, venues and promoters in the US are organizing not just by city and state, but at a national level for the first time ever. And we touched briefly on it earlier in the conversation, but I think let's go back to it. Moose, in what ways, Moose as the current executive director and Jackie as a member, what do you guys think? How can NIVA be a resource moving forward, especially sort of if we get, regardless of whether we get what we want right now, we get the acts passed or not, let's talk about the future and what that's going to look like for the organization.
You know, I'm actually going to answer this from the perspective of IVW, because when we brought Independent Venue Week to the US a handful of years ago, and there was, you know, I don't really think that the market had a strong understanding or knowledge of what the difference was between this one club here or that club over there. And, you know, the whole intent of Independent Venue Week was to be able to say, hey, listen, when you spend your money, when you book a tour, when you cover a band's show or whatever it is, know that this venue here is independent and there's a reason to support them for that reason alone. And that the other ones nearby might not necessarily be. And it's a point of pride, right? You know, to be able to say, look what we're able to do with the community support and with the support of those around us that believe in it. And I think that's very reflective of entrepreneurial spirit and American, you know, road is paved with gold and all the other stuff that we as Americans, you know, get pumped about, that, you know, the bootstraps and all the other stuff that that you hear us talk about all the time. And you know, what with the creation of NIVA from as a trade organization, what that does is it takes it outside of just the presentation and the marketing and the public perception of it, and it makes it more functional. And it allows the venues and the promoters across the country to be able to join forces in a more functional manner and take on causes that are important. In this specific case, the cause is the cause of existence, right? If right now, you know, we have our own studies as NIVA that have shown 90% of independent venues and promoters will not make it through the first 6 months of this pandemic without financial assistance. We're 4 months in right now. And I guarantee you, if I tab over to my inbox, I'm going to have a note from somebody saying this is it, or here's a new closed venue, or, you know, because it's happening too regularly right now. And you know, so post pandemic, or I could even go so far as to say post this current congressional session, which is wrapping up in the next week or two. You know, the fact that the independent venues and promoters are organized and are working together gives us collectively a much better voice when decisions are being made that previously had been on our behalf, but didn't consider any input and didn't have necessarily a contact point or a place to start. And you know, I'll try to do this and be politically minded here and not throw anyone under the bus. But you know, Cecilia, because you and I worked very closely together at the onset of this pandemic, we as Independent Venue Week tried our best to reach out to many very, very important players in the live industry, and we're essentially told time and time again some variation of when they want the voice of the independents, they'll reach out. And now as NIVA with over 2,000 members, you know, we have a voice and we have a presence and we have support and we have industry support. and we have support of other trade organizations from different sectors, the entire music industry needs us to succeed, and they've been showing that with their support across the board.
Yeah, Jackie, as a member, do you just echo everything you said, or are there any other courses that you think you could see Niva take down the line? And realize it's probably a hard thing to think about right now, but let's play with the thought.
I mean, for me, you know, I kind of laugh because Independent Venue Week, I tweeted like in January, I was like, oh, and you know, Independent Restaurant Week, I wonder if there's an Independent Venue Week. And I didn't even know about NIVA, you know, until then. And so I did sign up pre-pandemic, but I didn't even know about it. And someone reached out to me on Twitter, was like, come join us, you know, and I think because we're independent, you go it alone. You're like, we got this, we can do it. We don't need help. You know, we want to do what we want to do and do it our way. And I think that independent spirit is what never maybe united all of these venues across the country. And unfortunately, it took a pandemic to find us all. And I am grateful for Moose and Cecily for you being this organization, because our first meeting was just this kind of chaos. Almost everyone's like, we don't know what to do. And now I think we're seeing that NIVA, we're finding ways that we can help one another, how we can band together to fight for what we know is right, which is the ability to eventually be able to open in a safer time and to really show how important independent venues are to the makeup of our country. And so I'm grateful it's there. And yeah, we're just waiting for this legislative session. I think it's really hard to think about anything else other than that right now.
If I can jump in, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we hear you.
All my technical difficulties. I'd love to see us continue after, this is post-pandemic, right? It's really hard to see past that, but let's take on the insurance companies. Let's take on ASCAP and BMI. Let's start attacking those that have been taking advantage of us for so damn long that it just infuriates me. But we can't really focus on that right now. But, you know, once these bills are passed, that's what we need to put our energy into. That's my belief.
And I think while we continue to hope that happens, and we're now I'm speaking on behalf of everyone, but cautiously hopeful. At least it seems like some things are happening. I wanted to also take the last few minutes, since there are no questions, to sort of ask the overarching question here. Maybe not will there ever be an American tour, because I think we all here agree that there just has to be, even if we have to make it happen by ourselves. But each of you, when do you think it's going to be? Like, if I sit in the UK right now and I'm watching this and I'm thinking about planning, what should I plan for?
I would plan for 2022, unless a vaccine becomes widely available to everyone in the UK and in America. But even then, if that was to happen now, I think we would still be looking well into next year at the earliest. So I'm going to say 2022 for international touring.
Yeah.
Marauder's business, you know, at its core is to be able to help people find their entry point into, you know, and develop within North America. So we work with a significant number of non-American artists and labels from around the world and helping come up with the strategies. I would say there's probably not going to be worth in planning a tour before January 21st. And you know, past that, I think if you're really going to put the plans in place, and you're going to start with that 6 months to a year lead time, yeah, you should be looking towards 2022. And that's also, you know, you're probably not going to get holds right now, but at least you can start putting the groundwork and start getting all the other elements into place that Serena was talking about earlier, as far as just promoting yourself, promoting your band, promoting the music, reaching an audience, identifying who that audience is. And then by the time it comes to reaching out to promoters and venues directly, you do have that audience. So I would say use this as the silver lining of being in this position, because you're not competing for dates at the moment. You're just competing for attention and eyeballs. And that's been something every band has done under any situation anyway.
I'm slightly more hopeful. But I also have small rooms, right? I have a 400 cap and 300 cap room. So I think that artists will be very hungry. It's not going to be the typical planning to ramp up. Now, international tours, that's a different story, as we just talked about, but nationally or within reach, I think you can start to fill it quickly. So I'm hoping the fall is where we can start to ramp up and get closer to where we were. That's my hope. But that, of course, being 2021, fall of 2021.
Yeah, I agree with Gomez. By the way, I do hope the domestic market opens up and is able to happen a lot sooner than what I just said for international stuff.
Jackie, when do you think it will be? You've been nodding your head.
I mean, I am a truly hopeful human being, and I believe in resilience, but I also, truthfully, I hope fall 2021. Again, for artists coming from overseas, it's going to take a long time. Be patient. It will happen, but I'd love to see us nationally get going. And again, it's all related to, since right now everything is by county and by city and everything is kind of not connected. I'm hoping to see after the election in November. So in 2021, maybe if we can all get everyone working under one structure, it'll be a little bit easier to find ways nationwide for us to have tours sooner than later.
All right, guys, thank you so much. I think our answer is there will be another American tour. You just have to plan for it like you would have to otherwise, and do what you can right now to get your ducks in a row. So, and I guess, we, and when I say we, I'm kind of talking as IBW US, NIVA, we'll do our very best to make sure that there are as many rooms as possible to return to.
Thank you.
Thank you guys so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.